before Daenerys Stormborn, long before the dance of the dragons tore a dynasty apart, there was one man who shaped the world with fire, Aegon Targaryen, the first of his name, the Conqueror. He came not as a king, but as a stranger from across the sea, carrying the last fire of Valyria in his blood. With his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, and 3 dragons older than empires, he crossed the narrow sea to a land divided by 7 crowns, 7 armies, 7 stubborn, fighting kings. But Westeros had never faced the shadow of wings. Castles trembled, steel melted, kings knelt or burned. In 1 generation, Aegon forged a realm from fire and ash and seated himself upon a throne made from the swords of the defeated. Tonight, we return to the birth of a dynasty, to the moment dragons set the sky ablaze and reshaped the destiny of a continent. This is the story of brothers and sisters, of conquest and sacrifice, of fire made into empire. This is the conquest of Aegon the Conqueror. Before Aegon became a conqueror, before dragons darkened the skies of Westeros, there was a city that ruled the world, Valyria, a place of glittering spires, rivers of molten fire, and magic older than written words. The Valyrians were not men, not fully. They were touched by flame, shaped by dragons, molded by the 14 fires that roared beneath their empire. And of all the dragon lords who walked the blazing streets, one family stood apart, House Targaryen. Not the mightiest, not the richest, but the only ones who listened carefully when prophecy whispered. A young maiden of their line dreamed of a shadow that would swallow Valyria whole. An endless night of fire, screams, stone shattering, dragons dying in the air. They believed her. When all other dragon lords left, the Targaryens quietly prepared to flee. They moved their dragons, their children, their treasures, to a small volcanic island far to the west, a lonely outpost where the waves beat against black stone cliffs, Dragonstone. And then, one day, the sky above Valyria split open. Flames brighter than the sun swallowed the empire whole. Mountains melted. Oceans boiled. Dragons screamed as their wings turned to ash mid-flight. The greatest civilization in history vanished in a single day. Valyria died. But the Targaryens lived. 5 dragons survived the doom, and with them, the last remnants of a world built in fire. On Dragonstone, the family rebuilt what they could. Farms growing through black soil, halls warmed by steaming vents, and above it all, the shadows of dragons circling the sky. They waited. They watched. They dreamed of fire. And nearly a century after the doom, a new heir was born into their line. A quiet, thoughtful, tall young man with the eyes of old Valyria and the blood of dragons in his veins. Aegon. He did not know it then, but the fate of Westeros, the destiny of an entire continent, was sleeping in his shadow. For Aegon the Targaryen was not born to keep Dragonstone. He was born to conquer. Aegon did not rise alone. For every dragon has 3 heads, and the conqueror had his. On Dragonstone, beneath halls carved from black stone and fire, 3 Targaryen siblings grew into a destiny older than Westeros itself. Aegon Targaryen, tall, quiet, unreadable. His mind sharper than any sword, his calm hiding a fire that would one day reshape the world. Visenya, his elder sister, fierce as a winter storm, warrior born, her hand never far from the hilt of Dark Sister. Her love was duty, her loyalty carved into steel. And Rhaenys, younger, radiant, living for song and skies, with a smile that soothed dragons and a spirit unbound as the wind. She loved flying more than any queen ever would love her throne. Together, they formed a single force, will, blade, and heart. But the true power they carried came from the sky. 3 dragons, Balerion the Black Dread, Aegon's mount, a monster older than kingdoms, his wings blotting out the sun, fire dark as midnight, jaws that could swallow horses whole. His shadow alone broke armies. Vhagar, Visenya's dragon, smaller than Balerion, but swift, lethal, with fire hot enough to melt stone walls in seconds. She would live long after Aegon's reign, long enough to shape the dance of the dragons. Merax's, Rhaenys' beloved, graceful, silver-eyed, with a roar that shook the earth and flames pale as dawn light. When these 3 wings rose together, black, green, and silver, the sky itself seemed to bow. Yet Aegon had no interest in ruling by terror. For years, he studied Westeros, its rivers, its lords, its rival kings, its strengths, and its weaknesses. He visited the shores of Blackwater Bay, standing on the high hill that overlooked the river mouth. A quiet place, a perfect place for the world he intended to build. Rhaenys once asked him, as they walked that empty hill together, "Is it glory you seek, brother?" Aegon looked to the horizon, calm, steady. "I seek a realm united," he said softly. "One people, one crown, one future." Dragons shifted above them, wings brushing the wind like oaths spoken in the sky. And so began the forging of the greatest empire Westeros would ever know. Not in battlefields, but in the hearts of 3 siblings destined to become legends. Before Aegon dreamed of conquest, before dragons cast their shadows over the realm, Westeros was a land of 7 kings, each ruling fiercely, proudly, jealously. 7 crowns, 7 armies, 7 egos too proud to kneel. These kings did not see themselves as part of one realm. They saw each other as rivals, obstacles, enemies waiting to be broken. And Aegon watched them quietly, knowing each one would play their part in the world he would build. First, to the south, lay the Stormlands, ruled by Argilac the Arrogant, a warrior with a temper like thunder, proud of his ancient line, determined to protect his borders at all cost. To the west, in the Golden Hills, sat House Lannister, ruled by King Loren the Last. His coffers overflowed with gold, his knights were feared, and he believed wealth could withstand dragons. Farther south, across sun-scorched deserts, ruled the princes of Dorne, proud, unbending, impossible to conquer, or so they claimed. To the east, beyond the arbor winds and fertile valleys, King Mern Gardner ruled the Reach, seat of endless farmland and the greatest armies in the realm. His lords dined under flowering trees, secure in their ancient power, unaware that fire does not care for roots or gardens. North of the neck, the great expanse of cold and forest and stone, stood the king in the north, Torrhen Stark, Lord of Winterfell, proud as the winter wind, cautious, loyal, slow to anger. But when he did, the north rose with him like a storm. In the Vale, the mountains echoed with the rule of Ronal Arryn, a boy king watched over by his fierce mother, Shara Arryn, a queen of sharp wisdom and sharper ambition. And finally, on the Iron Islands, ruled Harren Hoare, called Harren the Black, a tyrant, brutal, building a colossal castle, Harrenhal, meant to last for 1,000 years. Its stone towers stretched to the sky, thick as mountains, walls meant to defy any army. Harren believed stone could defy dragons. He would learn the price of pride. So many kings, each ruling their small worlds, each dreaming of glory, each believing they were unbreakable. None of them knew that across the narrow sea, on a lonely island of black stone, a man was sharpening a sword the world had never seen before. A sword not made of steel, but of fire. And soon, every one of these kings would face a choice they had never imagined: to kneel or to burn. On Dragonstone, inside the highest tower facing the narrow sea, there was a room unlike any in the world, a long wooden table, carved and painted into the shape of Westeros itself, mountains rising like ridges under the fingers, rivers marked in shimmering blue, forests painted in deep emerald. The painted table. No king before Aegon had ever needed such a thing. But Aegon did not dream of a castle. He dreamed of a continent. Night after night, he stood before the table in the silence of burning candles, studying each kingdom, each border, each mountain pass where battles would one day echo. Visenya stood beside him, a shadow of steel, her fingers resting lightly on the hilt of Dark Sister. Rhaenys sat on the edge of the table, humming softly, her eyes drifting to imagined skies where dragons soared free. Aegon traced the north with a quiet hand. "Torrhen Stark will not yield easily," he murmured. His finger slid down to the reach. "Mern Gardner and Loren Lannister are strong together." He paused over the Riverlands, where the unfinished towers of Harrenhal rose like black teeth. Visenya's lips curled slightly. "Harren is proud," she said. "Pride burns." Rhaenys tilted her head. "Do you seek war, brother?" she asked softly. Aegon looked across the painted table. At 7 kingdoms broken by old grudges, old hates, old wounds. "I seek unity," he said. "A world that does not tear itself apart." "With fire?" Visenya whispered. Aegon turned to her, the candlelight drawing sharp lines across his calm face. "With strength," he answered. Rhaenys slid down from the table, her gown brushing the painted forests of the Reach. "But if they refuse to kneel?" Aegon did not hesitate. His voice was soft, inevitable. "Then they will burn." Outside, Balerion the Black Dread lifted his colossal head toward the window, as if he understood. His shadow filled the sky, wings unfolding like an omen. Rhaenys smiled faintly. "Then let Westeros choose its fate." Aegon placed his hand over the heart of the painted table. The Crownlands, the place where Blackwater Bay met the river. The hill he had watched so many times at sunrise. "We begin here," he declared. "We build a new capital, a new seat of power, a new kingdom." Visenya nodded. Rhaenys breathed in softly. The wind outside shifted, carrying the hot breath of 3 dragons and the cold promise of war. Aegon lifted his eyes. No crown on his head, no army behind him. Just a man who had made a decision that would change the world. "Send word to the 7 kingdoms," he said. "A new age begins." At first light, the sea was calm, silent, almost unaware that history was about to step onto its shores. 3 ships carried the fate of Westeros, slender craft cutting through the mist as the rising sun painted the waters gold. On the lead ship stood Aegon Targaryen, black armor gleaming, cloak fluttering like a shadow of wings. Behind him, Visenya sharpened Dark Sister with slow, steady movements, sparks glinting like cold stars. Rhaenys leaned against the railing, eyes bright with excitement, her hair blowing wildly in the sea wind. And high above, hidden in the fog, 3 dragons circled. Balerion, Vhagar, Meraxes. The sky trembled with their presence. When the ships at last reached the coast, the boats were lowered, men rowing toward the sandy curve of an untouched shore. The oars dipped silently. The mist curled around them like pale fingers guiding destiny. Aegon stepped off the boat onto the dark sand, boots sinking slightly into the wet earth of the Blackwater. It was quiet. Not a city, not even a village. Just a hill, a river mouth, and the endless horizon. Rhaenys looked around, smiling. "Strange," she whispered. "This place feels new." Visenya closed her eyes, breathing in the air, the scent of pine, salt, and promise. "It feels like a beginning," she said. Aegon knelt and pressed his gloved hand into the soil. "Here," he murmured, "we build our city." The first banner of House Targaryen was raised on the hill, the three-headed dragon snapping in the morning breeze. No trumpets, no cheering crowds, just a modest army, 3 siblings, and 3 dragons watching from above. Aegon turned to his captains. "Build palisades, raise fortifications, secure the bank." His voice carried across the shore, quiet, unwavering, certain. While the men began their work, Balerion descended, landing with a thunderous crash that shook the very sand. His wings folded, casting a shadow long enough to swallow 100 men. Aegon placed his hand on the black dread's warm scales, whispering a single word in Valyrian. The dragon rumbled, smoke rising from his jaws, as if blessing the land. That night, fires burned along the shore, and the first camp of the Targaryen conquest took shape. Aegon stood on the hill, overlooking the river glow, armor glinting under moonlight. Visenya joined him silently. "Do you think they will bow?" she asked. Aegon's eyes drifted across the dark horizon, toward the kingdoms that lay waiting. "Some will," he said, "the wise ones." "And the others?" Aegon looked up to where Balerion slept against the cliff, smoke curling from his nostrils. "The others," he whispered, "will burn." When Aegon set foot on Westeros, the realm barely noticed. 3 ships, a few hundred soldiers, nothing compared to the vast hosts of the 7 proud kings. But those kings did not know what slept above the clouds. The first to answer Aegon's landing was Argilac the Arrogant, the Storm King, a man famous for his pride, his thunderous temper, and his refusal to kneel before any crown but his own. When word reached Storm's End that a Targaryen upstart had landed on the Blackwater, Argilac laughed. "A foreign boy and his sisters," he scoffed, "with a few sellswords? Let him come. My storm will drown him." But Argilac made one mistake. He sent back Aegon's offer. Aegon had proposed peace. Lands, alliances, marriage ties. A realm shared, not conquered. Argilac answered with an insult carved in steel. He sent back Aegon's messenger, with his hands cut off. Alongside them, a message. "These are the only hands you'll ever have in my lands." Visenya read the grisly offering with cold eyes. "He has declared war," she murmured. Rhaenys, silent for once, placed a soft hand on Aegon's arm. "He will not kneel." Aegon's gaze drifted toward the rising sun, its light glinting on Balerion's dark scales. "Then he will burn," he whispered. But even as Aegon prepared for war, other kings watched from afar. their curiosity turning slowly to fear. In the Vale, Queen Shara Erin sent envoys to observe the newcomers. She expected to find a pretender, a brash warrior with no discipline. Instead, they returned trembling. "He commands dragons, my queen," one whispered. "Dragons, like in the old tales." The young King Ronal asked quietly, "Can I ride one?" In the Riverlands, Heron the Black heard of Aegon's arrival and laughed loudly from his towering, cursed castle. "Let him come," Heron bellowed. "Stone cannot burn." But the lords under him, long oppressed, bitter, tired of his cruelty, whispered to each other for the first time in decades. "A dragon lord has come. Perhaps this is our chance." And in the north, Torrhen Stark read the reports in silence. He did not rush to anger or mock Aegon. "A man who commands dragons," he murmured softly, "is not a man to underestimate." His bannermen urged him to call the armies. Wolves howled in Winterfell's yards, sensing change in the air. But Torrhen stood still, calm as the northern snow. "I will wait," he said. "Let the south bleed first." Westeros held its breath, and above the black sands of the Blackwater, 3 dragons spread their wings, shadows stretching across the land like the first strokes of a coming storm. War had begun, while Argilac raged in the Stormlands. The Riverlands trembled beneath the shadow of their own tyrant, Heron the Black. For 40 years he had enslaved, taxed, and crushed the Riverlords beneath the weight of his ambition. His obsession was forged in stone. Harrenhal, a monstrous castle whose towers reached toward the heavens like iron fingers clawing at the sky. Thick walls, towers wide as mountains. Heron believed his fortress would protect him from death itself. But no wall, no matter how tall, could shield a man from wings and fire. When Aegon marched inland, the Riverlords rose quietly to welcome him. Black Heron's cruelty had broken their loyalty years ago. One by one, they knelt before Aegon. House Tully, House Blackwood, House Bracken, and many more. Aegon accepted their oaths not with arrogance, but calm purpose. "Serve me," he said, "and I shall serve the realm." And then, with his new allies behind him, he rode to the gates of Harrenhal. The castle loomed above him, cold, vast, arrogant. Heron stood atop the highest tower, armored in black steel, looking down at the Dragon Lord with a sneer carved across his face. Aegon raised his voice, calm, firm, echoing across the lake. "Yield, Heron whore. You built your kingdom on the backs of slaves. It ends today." Heron laughed, his voice carrying across the water. "My walls are thick enough to keep out your men." Aegon's reply was soft. "But are they thick enough to stop my dragon?" Heron snarled, his pride louder than reason. "Stone does not burn." Aegon looked up, shifted. A shadow moved. A long, impossibly vast shape descended from the sky, wings stretching wider than the castle itself. Balerion, the Black Dread. His roar split the heavens. Birds fled in every direction. The ground shook as he spiraled downward toward the tallest tower of Harrenhal. Aegon's voice rang like a death sentence. Dracarys. Balerion opened his jaws, a cavern of endless night, and released a torrent of flame hotter than the molten fires of Valyria. The great tower glowed red as the stone blistered, cracked, and began to melt like wax. Screams echoed from within. Harren's soldiers ran through burning hallways, armor glowing white with heat, skin blistering under their helmets as the castle turned into a furnace. The Riverlords watched in awe, faces lit by the reflection of hellfire. Balerion roared again, flame pouring through windows like rivers of sunlight. Harrenhal, once meant to stand for 1,000 years, buckled under the weight of dragon flame, and in the highest tower, the one Harren built to defy death, Harren the Black burned alive. When the fire finally died, Aegon rode forward through the smoking ruins. The castle had melted. Walls blackened, towers sagging, stone twisted like the bones of some ancient giant. No one laughed anymore. In the silence that followed, Aegon declared, "The Riverlands are mine," and every lord in the region bent the knee. Harrenhal still stands to this day, a burned, cursed reminder of the moment Westeros learned what dragons truly are. While Harrenhal smoldered in the Riverlands, another storm was gathering in the south. Argilac Durandon, the Storm King, ruler of the lands where tempests are born, refused to hide behind walls or kneel before a foreign invader. He was old, his beard streaked with gray, his body hardened by decades of battle. But his pride burned brighter than any flame. When he heard that Aegon had conquered the Riverlands, he did not send ravens. He did not plead. He gathered his banners, summoned every knight and swordsman loyal to House Durandon, and marched north. "Let the Dragon Lord meet a true king on the battlefield," Argilac declared. Rain swept across the land, thunder echoing among the cliffs as thousands of Stormlanders assembled beneath lightning-lit skies. Argilac rode at their head, armor hammered in the shape of crashing waves, his sigil of the crowned stag gleaming with each flash of lightning. This would be no siege, no hiding behind towers. Argilac wanted a fight, and Aegon gave him one. On the plains north of the Wendwater, where the grass bent under rain and wind, Aegon's vanguard waited. Soldiers loyal to him, Riverlords who had joined him after Harren's fall, and Visenya commanding the left flank, her cold eyes scanning the storm for movement. Rhaenys watched from Merax's saddle above, silver wings beating softly, raindrops sizzling on her dragon's warm scales. Aegon stood at the center, Balerion looming behind him, wings furled like black mountains. When the two armies finally faced each other, the storm fell silent, as if the gods themselves were holding their breath. Argilac rode forward alone, lowering his helm, water dripping off its crest. "Aegon Targaryen!" he shouted across the field. His voice echoed with thunder. "Face me, man to man, no dragons, no fire." Aegon did not move. Rain slid down his armor, shining like liquid obsidian. "I came to unite the realm," he called back, calm as a whisper beneath the storm. "Not to trade honor for death." Argilac snarled, a proud beast to the end. He lowered his lance and charged. The Stormlands roared behind him, a stampede of men in steel rushing across the soaked plains. The earth trembled beneath their charge. Aegon raised a single hand. Balerion took flight. Wings unfurled, massive, thunderous, sending a gale of wind washing over both armies. Argilac's charge wavered as men looked up and saw the sky darken. Rhaenys descended from the clouds on Meraxes, flame glowing in her dragon's throat like molten gold. Visenya mounted Vhagar, her eyes sharp as lightning. 3 dragons, 3 storms. Aegon's voice cut through the wind. Dracarys, fire fell like rain. Meraxes swooped low, her breath sweeping through the Stormlander ranks, sending men scattering like leaves in a hurricane. Vhagar's flames streaked across the field, turning the wet grass into steam. Armor glowing red beneath the heat. Balerion landed behind Argilac's cavalry, cutting off their retreat, trapping the Storm King between 3 dragons. Argilac fought on foot, striking at Balerion's leg with all his strength. But the Black Dread barely felt it. A wave of flame engulfed the Storm King's guard. When the fire cleared, Argilac stood alone. Armor melted to his skin, still gripping his sword. He did not bow. He died standing. When Aegon approached his body, he whispered softly, "The last Storm King is fallen." The Stormlands were his. Another kingdom burned, and another crown fell beneath the wings of dragons. Of all the battles fought during Aegon's conquest, none burned itself into history like the one that came next. The Field of Fire. The only time in 1,000 years that Westeros would see 3 dragons unleashed at once against an army on open ground. After the fall of Harrenhal and the death of Argilac, 2 great kings remained in the south. King Mern Gardner of the Reach, whose fertile lands fed all Westeros, and King Loren Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, with gold enough to arm an empire. Fearing Aegon's rise, they united their banners into one colossal host. 55,000 men, heavy cavalry glittering in gold, ranks of spearmen stretching across the horizon, arrows gleaming like black rain in the sun. The largest army Westeros had ever seen. Aegon's forces, by comparison, were far smaller. Riverlords, Stormlanders, and the few men he had brought across the sea. Yet Aegon did not fear. He had more than men. He had dragons. On a sweltering afternoon, where heat shimmered on the fields like mirrors, the two armies finally met near the borders of the Reach. Dust rose beneath marching feet. Grass bent under shields and hooves. The air grew thick, waiting. Aegon sat astride Balerion, black armor reflecting the blazing sun. Visenya circled the field on Vhagar, her presence a silent warning. Rhaenys soared higher on Meraxes, her dragon shimmering like a silver comet. Below them, Myrn and Lauren arranged their massive lines. Shields locked, pikes angled forward, archers ready to darken the sky. Lauren Lannister rode ahead, golden mane flowing behind him, shouting, "We will break them with our strength. The dragons cannot kill us all." A trembling messenger whispered to him, "My king, but they don't need to." The wind shifted. The world held its breath. A shadow covered the sun. Then 3 dragons descended. The sky became wings. Balerion roared, a sound that tore through the field, shaking shields in trembling hands. Vhagar's fire lit the horizon, white hot and deadly. Meraxes screamed, flame forming in her throat like a rising star. Aegon raised Blackfire, the Valyrian steel sword glowing darkly. His voice echoed across the plains. Dracarys, and Westeros changed forever. Fire fell in great sweeping arcs, raging across the fields. Grass ignited in seconds. Armor melted. Men turned to ash before they could even scream. The golden armor of House Lannister glowed red, then white, then liquid. The proud Gardener banners wilted into black threads. Horses panicked, crashing into burning lines. Soldiers trampled by their own companions. The heat became unbearable. A wall of flame stretching miles across the plain. It was not a battle. It was a cleansing. King Myrn Gardener died with all his sons and grandsons. His entire dynasty erased in moments. King Lauren fled, armor scorched, cloak burned to embers, abandoning his shattered host. He rode straight to Aegon, fell from his horse, and knelt in the ashes of his own army. "My king," he said through trembling lips, "I yield." Aegon looked down at him, Balerion's smoke drifting behind like a storm. "Rise, Lauren Lannister," he replied softly, "and serve the realm." On that day, under a sky filled with fire, the Reach lost its kings. The West lost its pride. And all of Westeros learned the true meaning of dragonfire. After the field of fire, the plains still glowed with embers. Smoke curled into the darkening sky like the last breath of a dying age. 50,000 men had marched. Fewer than 5,000 survived. And the world understood. Dragons rule from above, not armies from below. King Lauren Lannister, his golden armor scorched black, rode through the ashes with trembling reins. Just hours before, he had commanded the mightiest cavalry in the West. Now he was simply a man covered in soot, humbling himself before a conqueror. He knelt at Aegon's feet on the burnt earth that had once been a thriving battlefield. "My king," he whispered, "I serve." Aegon did not boast, did not smile. He simply nodded. "Rise, Lauren Lannister. Rule your land in my name." And so the West was won, not with the sword, but with surrender. But the Reach, rich and fertile, demanded more. Its ancient kings, the gardeners, lay dead on the field of fire, their line extinguished, their banners burned. The great castle of Highgarden waited silently beneath flowering groves, its lords uncertain, fearing annihilation. Aegon did not march to Highgarden with armies. He flew. Meraxes soared ahead, Rhaenys surveying the emerald fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. Wheat bent in golden waves below, still untouched by war, the only beauty left in a realm trembling in fear. When Aegon arrived, Highgarden's gates opened wide before he even reached the walls. The castle was quiet, filled with lords and knights in green cloaks of the Reach, weapons lowered, heads bowed. At their center stood Harlan Tyrell, the steward of House Gardner. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled. "My king, my liege lords are dead. My people need a ruler who can protect them from fire and chaos." Aegon studied him for a long moment. Rhaenys, beside him, offered a faint smile. "Do you kneel?" Aegon asked quietly. Harlan Tyrell dropped to both knees, lowering his head to the ground. "Before fire, I kneel." Aegon extended his sword, the blade gleaming like a dark promise under the sun. "Rise, Harlan Tyrell," he said softly. "Lord Paramount of the Reach, Warden of the South." The lords of the Reach bowed with him, one after another, and Highgarden's gold became Aegon's. No battle, no blood spilled, just a surrendered crown and a new dynasty shaped by dragonfire. By nightfall, Aegon stood atop Highgarden's walls, watching the fireflies drift over the fields. "Two kingdoms kneel," Rhaenys whispered beside him. Aegon nodded slowly. "And 5 remain." Balerion roared in the sky above them, wings blotting the moonlight. A reminder that the conquest had only just begun. With the West kneeling and the Reach bending its proud banners, Aegon Targaryen turned his eyes south, toward a land unlike any he had conquered. Dorne, a scorching realm of red mountains, hidden valleys, sun-bleached stone keeps, and a people shaped not by fertile land or iron mines, but by survival. No fields to burn, no forests to scorch, only sand and sun, and a spirit that refused to kneel. At its heart ruled Princess Maria Martell, old, blind, wrapped in desert silks, sitting upon a low sandstone throne in the cool shade of Sunspear's tower. When news reached Dorne that Aegon had burned armies, shattered crowns, and melted a castle of stone, she did not tremble. She smiled. "Let the dragon come," she said softly. "We have beaten armies. Let us try our hand against a god." Aegon rode south with confidence, Balerion casting a vast shadow over parched earth, Rhaenys and Visenya flying at his sides like twin blades cutting the sky. But Dorne did not meet him on open field. No banners, no armies, no challenge. The desert was silent, empty. Villages abandoned, crops uprooted, wells poisoned, leaving nothing for invaders to claim. Rhaenys flew low on Meraxes, scanning the sands below. "Where are their soldiers?" she whispered. Visenya answered, hiding. But the truth was more dangerous. They were waiting. Aegon marched through the desert for days, burning empty houses, taking empty keeps, seizing empty roads. Nothing to conquer, nothing to rule, only sun and sand and silence. When he finally reached Sunspear, he found its gates wide open, and not a single army. Rhaenys landed in the palace courtyard, Meraxes' great wings blowing sand into swirling clouds. A single elderly servant guided them to a shaded hall. There sat Princess Myrya, blind eyes lifted, as if she could see the 3 dragon lords as clearly as day. Rhaenys stepped forward. "Princess of Dorne," she said, "we bring terms from King Aegon." Myrya's voice was a whisper wrapped in steel. "We will not kneel." Aegon stiffened. "You saw what happened to the others." Myrya nodded slowly. "I have heard." The Reach burned. The West surrendered. Harren the Black melted in his own tower. She leaned forward, fragile, ancient, yet unshaken. "But dragons cannot hold sand. You may burn our castles, but you will gain nothing. We do not fight you, and we do not kneel." Rhaenys stared at the old woman, realizing the truth of her words. Aegon's eyes narrowed. "Then what do you choose?" Myrya lifted her chin. "We choose to endure." Aegon left Dorne with no victory, no crown, no surrender. The desert remained untouched, a realm that fire could scorch, but never break. As Meraxes lifted into the sky, Rhaenys looked back at the sunlit towers of Sunspear and whispered, "One day, Dorne will kneel." Myrya's soft reply drifted after them on the hot desert wind. "Not in my lifetime." High above the rest of the world, perched upon a mountain so steep even goats feared to climb it, stood the most unreachable fortress in all Westeros, the Eyrie. White towers rising into clouds, walls carved from pale stone gleaming like moonlight. A castle too high for ladders, too narrow for siege towers, too remote for armies, and within it ruled King Ronal Arryn. a gentle boy of barely 6 years, his crown resting lightly on soft golden curls. His mother, Queen Shara Aegon, ruled in his stead, wise, cautious, fiercely protective. When news spread that Aegon had burned Harrenhal, shattered the Reach, and defeated kings in open battle, Shara fortified every path leading to the Eyrie. Archers on every ledge, stones ready to be dropped on invaders below. She even sent Aegon a proposal, not of surrender, but of marriage. "Take my hand," her message said, "and the Vale will kneel." Aegon declined, politely, firmly. The Queen of the Vale felt insult burn her pride hotter than any dragon flame. She prepared for siege, but no siege came. Instead, a shadow passed across the mountain, a shape larger than any bird that had ever flown those skies. Vhagar. Visenya rode her, silver hair flowing like a banner behind her, as the dragon spiraled upward into the thin, freezing air of the high mountains. The knights of the Vale turned pale as ice. This was not a siege. This was a goddess ascending the heavens. Vhagar landed in the courtyard of the Eyrie with a thunderous crack that sent servants stumbling and shook frost from the towers. Queen Shara stood frozen, fingers gripping her son's shoulders, as she faced the dragon she had prayed would never come. Visenya dismounted with calm, deadly grace. She did not need soldiers. She had wings. She walked past Shara without a word and knelt before little King Ronal. "Your Grace," she said softly, "tell me, would you like to fly?" The boy's eyes widened, brighter than diamonds. "Can I?" he whispered. Queen Shara gasped. "Ronal, no." But Visenya smiled, gentle and terrifying all at once. "A king may go where he pleases." Ronal looked at his frightened mother, then at Vhagar, whose wings stretched wider than the entire courtyard. "I want to fly," he said. Visenya lifted him onto the saddle before her, buckling him in with steady hands. Shara's heart pounded, torn between terror and the futility of refusing a dragon. With a powerful leap, Vhagar soared upward, past the white towers, past the clouds, past the fear that kept men glued to the earth. Ronal giggled, laughter bright and pure in the thin mountain air. "Higher, Lady Visenya, higher!" And Vhagar obeyed, climbing so high the world turned small beneath them. When they landed again, the young king was beaming. He turned to his mother and declared happily, "Mother, I want to kneel." Shara Aegon, outmatched by dragon and child alike, bowed her head in defeat. The Vale surrendered without a single drop of blood spilled. Aegon later said, "Visenya won the Vale with a child's laughter, not fire." And so another kingdom bent the knee to the three-headed dragon. In the far north, beyond the neck, where the warm lands end and winter begins, ruled a king unlike any Aegon had faced before. Torrhen Stark, the king in the north. a man of quiet thought, steady honor, and a pride carved not from arrogance, but from centuries of stark blood flowing like ice through Winterfell's halls. When word reached him that dragons had burned the Reach, shattered the West, melted Harrenhal, and tamed the Vale, Torrhen did not rage. He did not boast. He called his banners. 30,000 Northerners marched south under gray cloaks and white direwolf banners, snow swirling around them as if winter itself walked beside them. They met Aegon's army at the Trident, where the river branches in three like outstretched fingers. The air was sharp with cold, the ground hard as iron. Wolves watched from the tree line, sensing the weight of fate on the wind. Torrhen rode forward alone, his breath fogging the air, his armor simple, unadorned, made for war, not spectacle. His scouts had seen the dragons, all three, Balerion circling the skies like a shadow the size of a castle, Vhagar perched on a ridge of red stone, Meraxes gliding low above the river, causing ripples with every beat of her wings. Torrhen had faced wildlings, ironborn, storms, famine, and winters that killed kingdoms. But he had never faced fire older than civilization. As he looked upon Aegon's forces, his captains urged him, "We are Northerners. We do not kneel." Torrhen's eyes remained fixed on the sky. He saw his men, brave, loyal, wrapped in furs and honor, and he imagined them burning. "Bravery is not foolishness," he said quietly. That night, he visited Aegon's camp in the darkness before dawn. Visenya stood guard, dark sister in hand, her eyes reflecting torchlight like cold silver. Rhaenys watched from the shadows, Meraxes rumbling softly behind her. Aegon rose from the painted table as the king in the north entered. "Torrhen Stark," he said, "have you come to fight?" Torrhen removed his gloves slowly, laying them on the table. Then he removed his sword. Ice, the great Valyrian blade of House Stark. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of every king before him, and one after him. Then, with a steady breath that trembled only once, he knelt. The north fell silent. Even the dragons grew quiet. Aegon stepped forward, looking down at the kneeling king. Torrhen's voice was low, rough with shame and wisdom. "I will not let my people burn for the pride of one man." He bowed his head deeper. "I kneel, so the north may live." Aegon placed a hand on Torrhen's shoulder, not as conqueror over conquered, but as king acknowledging king. "Rise, Torrhen Stark," he said softly, "warden of the north." And so, without a single sword raised, the ancient kingdom of winter bent the knee to fire. Torrhen would forever be known as the king who knelt, not out of fear, but out of love for the lives he refused to sacrifice. You, with the north kneeling and the Vale tamed by dragon wings, Aegon had almost forged his new realm. Almost. two great powers remained: the Ironborn, wild masters of the sea, and Old Town, the oldest, richest, most learned city in the south. One ruled by fear, the other ruled by faith, and both watched the rise of Aegon with wary, calculating eyes. The Iron Islands, the last shadow of Harrenhal. News of Harrenhal's burning reached the Iron Islands like a cold wind from across the rivers. Harren the Black, tyrant, butcher, last king of House Hor, had died, screaming in his steel-melted tower. His son, Harren's last heir, now ruled from Pike. A cruel man, but not a foolish one. When he heard that Aegon Targaryen was marching west with dragons, his captains urged him to fight, boasting of longships, reavers, and the wild storms of the Sunset Sea. But the heir only shook his head. "We cannot sail against the sky," he whispered. And so, before even a single dragon appeared over the islands, a raven flew to Aegon's camp. Its message was simple: the Iron Islands will kneel. Aegon accepted. With the fall of House Hor, he raised a new house in their place, House Greyjoy, chosen to rule the Ironborn as lords paramount of the Isles. Thus, the sea bent to fire without a drop of blood spilled. Old Town, the city of light and silence. One final kingdom remained before Aegon could call himself king of all Westeros. Old Town, a city of high towers, white walls, golden spires, and the whisper of thousands of prayers drifting through its ancient streets. Here stood the Starry Sept, the beating heart of the faith. Here ruled House Hightower, proud and patient, watching the rise and fall of kings for centuries. When Aegon approached Old Town, Balerion flew ahead. A black star draped over the sky. People fled indoors. Priests whispered, and the bells rang as if mourning a future yet to come. But Lord Hightower did not raise arms. He sent his knights not to the walls, but to the doors of the Starry Sept. There, the High Septon, the most powerful religious figure in the realm, prayed in silence. For hours, he lay before the altar of the Seven, asking the gods whether this dragon lord was a tyrant to be resisted, or destiny itself. When he rose, his face was pale, his voice trembling with revelation. "The gods have spoken," he said. "This Aegon is the prince who shall unite the realm." The next morning, the gates of Old Town opened wide. Balerion landed in the courtyard of the Starry Sept, shaking its ancient stones. Aegon dismounted and walked through the great doors, unarmed, unguarded, his footsteps echoing like fate. The High Septon blessed him, anointing him with 7 holy oils, his voice steady, his hands trembling. "From this day forth," he proclaimed, "you shall be known as Aegon of House Targaryen, first of his name, king of all Westeros, and protector of the realm." Bells rang. Priests chanted. The city bowed. And for the first time in history, a single king ruled the 7 kingdoms. The conquest was over. After centuries of division, 7 crowns scattered like broken glass, the realm finally stood beneath one king. Aegon Targaryen, tall, calm, unreadable, returned to the Blackwater Bay, where it had all begun. The hill where he first set foot in Westeros was no longer empty sand and wind. It was filled with tents, carts, banners of houses old and new, workers hauling stone, masons shaping foundations, building a dream Aegon had carried in silence for years. A new capital, a new city, a new order. The first stones were laid down under Aegon's gaze. Visenya advised on defense, pointing to cliffs and rivers where walls would one day rise. Rhaenys studied the ports, imagining bustling harbors, ships from every land docking under peaceful skies. This place, once quiet as a whisper, would become the heart of a kingdom. King's Landing. The dream began in fire, but its future would be built with stone. In the weeks that followed, envoys from every corner of the realm arrived to pay homage. Lords bent the knee. Knights offered their swords. Houses that once fought fiercely now pledged loyalty beneath the 3-headed dragon. The only land that still resisted was Dorne, silent, proud, untouched by flame. But even that would come later, in blood and heartbreak. For now, the realm was united, and in Old Town, in the great starry sept, Aegon received the blessing of the faith of the 7. Oil glistened on his brow. The crowd fell silent as the High Septon spoke. Aegon of House Targaryen, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. Balerion roared outside the sept, his voice echoing across the city like the thunder of a new age. When Aegon rose from his knees, he did not smile. He did not boast. He simply breathed, steady, calm, the weight of a continent settling on his shoulders. A man born on Dragonstone now ruled a realm stretching from the frozen wall to the burning sands of Dorne. A man who crossed the sea with only his sisters and 3 dragons now commanded millions. A man forged in fire had made fire into empire. And as he walked out beneath the open sky, Balerion lowered his massive head in a bow that shook the stones. The message was clear. The age of dragons had begun. And so, beneath the rising sun of a land forever changed, the age of Aegon the Conqueror drew its first quiet breath. 7 kingdoms, once divided by steel and centuries of pride, now bound together by fire and by fate. The Blackwater Bay, where Aegon first stepped ashore, glittered softly, no longer a lonely stretch of sand, but the heart of a city still wrapped in scaffolding and dreams. Dragons slept upon its cliffs, wings folded, fires dimmed, as if resting after reshaping the world. In the wind, their breath rose like warm mist, drifting across the night sky, reminding the realm that peace, like flame, must always be tended. Aegon Targaryen, first of his name, stood upon the high hill where King's Landing would rise, watching lights flicker from 1,000 campfires across the plains. His sisters stood beside him, Visenya, silent and vigilant, her hand resting on the hilt of Dark Sister, and Rhaenys, smiling softly, her eyes always drifting to where Meraxes slept in the dark. For the first time in his life, Aegon allowed himself a quiet breath. Not of victory, not of conquest, but of beginning. The conquest had ended. Yet the true work, the building of a kingdom, the shaping of a dynasty, was only just beginning. And somewhere in the deep night, Balerion the Black Dread lifted his head and exhaled a low, gentle rumble, as if whispering to the world that the Dragon Lords had returned, and their fire would not be forgotten. Tonight, you've walked beside kings, queens, deserts, mountains, and shadows of ancient wings. You've witnessed the fall of proud crowns, the rise of a unified realm, and the first steps of a dynasty that would shape centuries. Rest now. Breathe. Let the warmth of dragonfire fade softly around you. And remember, in every age, in every story, there is a moment when the world bends, not to steel, but to flame. Good night, and may the dragons guard your dreams.